Hi, it's John again, and continuing again with that mid-air crash from July 31st of 2020. This is just a headline for the final report. Again, this is from, oh no, I almost said NBC News. No, this is not from NBC News. This is from a place called planeandpilotmagazine.com or planeandpilotmag.com. As you can see, the address bar there. This is where I got the story from. So refers to the final report regarding that crash, right? And so this was issued, issued by the NTSB, so the National Transportation Safety Board in the U.S. And it was issued on December 8th, 2022. So less than a year now, because this is early November 2023. So this was put out 11 months ago. Last December, okay? So, again, there's the dates that happened, July 31st, 2020. I already mentioned why that was a significant so-called coincidence that, wasn't a coincidence. And there's the 12, I mentioned that before in one of the previous videos, right? So I'm going to go to the next screenshot here. And, I'm going to show you another so-called coincidence. Oh, shit. Hit the stupid mouse pad again, and the screenshot went ahead to the next one before I got to what I was going to say here. Okay, so another so-called coincidence regarding this. Now, if my brother did this, okay, this crash by remote control, crashed, the one plane into the other one, he would have known that there'd be an investigation after, of course, and he would have known that because it was a mid-air crash, one of the possible causes that they would consider in the official investigation is they would be considering and discussing how long it takes for the pilot of one plane to see the pilot of another plane, and to react to it, right? Because for a mid-air crash, these are things that are considered. These are factors that are considered, like, how long does it take, for one pilot to see another pilot under ideal conditions, and the conditions were ideal in this crash. The weather was very good, right? So this is something that my brother would know, that would be talked about by the officials investigating the crash, and it was indeed, because if you look here, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, guidance indicates that 12.5 seconds, okay, 12.5 seconds, excuse me, is the minimum time for a pilot to visually acquire another aircraft, judge a collision course, and take evasive action, okay? Therefore, there was adequate time for both pilots to see and avoid the other airplane, okay? So this is part of the official NTSB final report regarding this crash. They determined that there was enough time, and I believe I read in one of the other articles, which I don't have here, oh yeah, actually it is here. They repeat it here. One person, okay, just 1 second here. Okay, yeah, so basically they determined that the pilot from the one airplane had 53 seconds to see the other person, the other pilot, the other plane, 53 seconds to see them and take appropriate action. And the pilot from the P-812 had 28.3 seconds to see the other plane and to take action, right? So in other words, both of those times, 53 seconds and 28 seconds, are well above the minimum 12.5 seconds. That's the minimum that it takes, for one pilot to, see the other aircraft, judge a collision course, and take evasive action, right? Because that's the standard minimum, 12.5 seconds, right? So in other words, both the pilots in this case had more than enough time to see each other and take evasive action. So in other words, they saw each other, okay? So it wasn't a real accident, based on the fact that one of them couldn't see each other, because that's not a fact, because they could see each other, as it proves right there in the final report. One guy had 53 seconds to see the other pilot, the other plane, and judge the collision course and take evasive action, and the other pilot had 28.3 seconds to do the same thing, right? So in other words, both of those times are way above 12.5 seconds, the minimum, right? But the reason I think, my brother chose the midair is because, like I said, he knew that the 12.5 seconds minimum would come up in discussion within the official investigation into these crashes, and that the media would probably repeat it, just like they did repeat it. They did put it in this story, right? They put it in this story, and I also read it in another story. It was either from the NBC or the New York Times one, or from the Alaska.org, something else, not Alaska.org, Alaska something else.org, AlaskaPublic.org, I think it was. I think that was the first article that I used in the screenshot for this series of videos, going back now, I don't know, half a dozen videos or something. This is taking way longer than I thought it would, but anyway, I can't help it. So the point is, the 12.5 seconds is the minimum that the FAA had determined, a while ago, that is the minimum that it takes, in these types of situations, for one pilot to see the other aircraft and take appropriate action, right? So, again, I think my brother knew that because he did his research, and therefore I think that's one of the reasons why he chose to do some of these crashes, as mid-air crashes, instead of, diving into the ground like a lot of the other ones, right? I think he decided to do some of these mid-air because he knew then that 12.5 would be repeated, would be mentioned by the media, just like it's in this article and other articles, right? And again, the 12.5 is a significant number. Now, this one's not off. This one's not off by one digit, like I was saying, about, in the previous video, how, for some of these significant numbers in the last year or the last 8 months or so, he's been like doing one off, like one digit off, and maybe previous years too, like for this crash, I think that he picked the time, to be one off, like representing a significant number being his birthday, right? I mentioned that in the previous video, right? I think he picked one digit to be off intentionally, right? But for some of them, there's still significant numbers right on. I mean, like bang on every digit. Not either two digits, a two-digit series of numbers, like a series of numbers, with 2 digits or even 3 digits, right? Some of them are still right on, like they're not off even by one, right? And this is an example of that, right? The 12.5. Because remember, I was born on May 12. Okay, so what is 12.5? Well, if you consider, if you disregard the point, the decimal, right, or if you treat it as a hyphen or a slash or just a space, then you're left with a 12 and a 5, right? The 5 is separated from the 12, right? But it's still close enough, like it would be if you're writing down someone's birthday. Well, again, my birthday, as I proved in some previous videos, is on May 12. I showed my birth certificate, right? Before, on at least one of my previous videos, I showed my birth certificate, okay? That I was born on May 12, all right? So again, May is the 5th month, and 12, right? The 12th of May, right? Well, you can write it as, if you're writing it numerically, you could write my birthday as 5/12, or you can write it as 12/5. Either are acceptable, right? When you write down your birthday on various forms or whatever, and you write it in numbers, you can write it with the month first or the day first, depending on the form, right? Both are acceptable, right? So again, this 12.5 represents my birthday, right? So it is another significant number. 3 digits of significance, right? 12/5. Okay? As in the 12th of May. So there's that. Now let's go to the next screenshot. Okay, so for this one here, remember what I said about the number 8 before in some of my previous videos about why 8 is a significant number? how it came up in a number of crashes, including the MAX 8 crashes, right? And for the China East Airlines that crashed on March 21st of last year, 2022, it was also significant because of it was a 737-800, 737-800 plane that crashed, and then also it was significant because when it leveled off after the first dive, it leveled off at 8,000 feet. It leveled off for a few moments before resuming the dive and before finally crashing. Right? So I explained all that several videos ago, right? I don't know, probably 10 videos ago by now, however many. It's in this series, right? Whatever number it is. I explained that before. And I explained in another video in this series why 8 is significant, in terms of where we used to live at one of our childhood addresses, right? How the 8 came up in the building, the number on the building, our apartment number, and the number in the postal code, which is in the postal code is like your zip code in the States, right? So I explained all that in another video about the 8. So here is the 8 coming up again, okay? Look. The pilot of that PA-12, and there's that 12 coming up again, right? I mentioned the significance of that, of course, right? So the pilot of that PA-12, who was Mr. Knopp, by the way, in case we forgot. So he had been turned down for an FAA medical certificate 8 years prior to the accident, to what they're calling an accident, what I'm calling murder. Prior to the crash, okay, so prior to that midair crash, he was turned down for a medical certificate. I guess like that would allow him to, renew or acquire his pilot's private pilot certificate or whatever it's called. The point is he was turned down for that medical certificate 8 years prior to the crash, okay? So again, the number 8 has come up again, right? Now, also, another thing about this is so I think that covers all the coincidences for this crash, and there were a bunch of them, right? As I've shown now in these last number of videos, right? So, but I think that's the last one there. In case if I forgot one, I'll get to it in some future video. But I think that's it for the coincidences. But I want to mention something else about this, and that is about the fact that, as usual, the investigators are never going to even hint that a plane could have been hacked and crashed. They're always going to either say, that it was an accident, it was pilot error, blah blah blah. Or if they don't have proof that it was, then they're going to imply something based on no or insufficient evidence. Like here, what they're doing is they're implying by, well, I'm going to read this first, this little paragraph, right? I'll read it first, and then I'll say what I think they're implying. So it says, the NTSB found that the pilot of the PA-12 had been turned down for an FAA medical certificate 8 years prior to the accident due to open-angle glaucoma and severely limited peripheral vision. Investigators postulated, in other words guessed, that the PA-12 pilot's central vision was likely significantly impaired too, okay? So basically, they're saying that the crash happened, or partially happened, because of the pilot's vision, because of Mr. Knopp's bad vision, right? Because he was turned down for his medical certificate for to allow him to legally fly 8 years prior to the crash. But they say right there, investigators postulated, right? They're guessing that was a factor in the crash, right? But they're still bringing something up, some type of so-called evidence, to reduce the chances, perhaps, that somebody like me may speculate that it was a hack based on more evidence than what they're presenting, that it was a vision problem. I think I present more evidence that the planes were hacked and crashed based on everything I said in this video and the last couple of videos, compared to what they're saying, because basically I'm going to shoot down their argument right now when they say that's a possible reason that the plane crashed. Because look, 8 years prior he was turned down. What that tells me is that he was flying for 8 years. Even without that certificate, he was still flying for 8 years prior to the crash. Now, if his vision was so bad, why did it take 8 years? 8 years for him to crash. It didn't. I'm sure he would have been flying at least a couple of times a year. Okay, at least a couple of times a year during those 8 years. So that would have been at least 20 flights before the crash. So I don't think it was because of his vision, okay? Otherwise, I think it would have happened a lot sooner. I think that's just a part of the official cover-up story. They're not going to admit that it was probably hacked and crashed.